Welcome back. And now it's on to our second session, Innovation in a Time of Disruption, featuring Professor Rita Kotila. The lightning talk will be immediately followed by a 10-minute Q&A, so feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box directly below the live video. Without further delay, I give you Professor Rita Kotila.
Hello, everybody. So excited to be speaking to our alumni. Today, in the next 15 minutes or so, we will talk about ongoing research in our Entrepreneurship and Innovation Center, the Stanford Technology Ventures program here at MSNE. And the topic is whether pushing for more regulation could drive increases in novelty and innovation in an industry. So the topic is much in the news these days, given how the pandemic has raised the power of dominant platforms. We are all cooped up at home and ordering stuff online. So the power of platforms and what we should do about it as a society is much in the news. My co-author is Shruti Thatchengari from UCL London, alumnus of the MSNE department, got her PhD a few years ago from the Stanford Technology Ventures program, and Shruti is in the audience today. This project pulls heavily from what started as Shruti's award-winning dissertation at STVP. We'll bring back to you your favorite antitrust flashback, the Microsoft case in the early 2000s. The big question we want to ask in this project that showcases what we are doing at STVP today is, if we reduce the power of dominant platforms, do we indeed get more innovation and more variety? So do antitrust enforcement and more innovation go hand in hand, as is promised in much of the public debate today? This is ongoing work. Other parts of this project are published in the journal Organization Science, but today, what I will talk to you about is ongoing work, and we of course welcome your comments and ideas. So why this project? Our focus is on regulatory interventions that target dominant platforms. So here, think Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, the many antitrust cases that have popped up just in the last 6 months or in the last few years in the US, in China, in European Union against these dominant platforms. So simply put, we ask whether the intent of this regulation is fulfilled. Should we expect to see more alternatives, more innovation emerge after we've regulated a powerful platform? So to speak, put a harness on a dominant firm. So to give you a little bit of context of where we are going, some recent examples of antitrust regulation include Google, just 2 years ago, fined in Europe for bundling complements, its own apps with its mobile platform. In other words, tying search and Chrome apps on Android mobile devices. So when you read the reasoning by regulators, in this case and many other cases, the statement almost always points to innovation as the motivator, and specifically that dominant platforms block innovation in complementary markets. So it was a case in 2018, and again in 2019. And the more recent case in point is from October 2020, perhaps even more relevant to the data that I will show in our analysis today. The question is, when Slack, your favorite workplace communications app, blames Microsoft for bundling Microsoft's own workplace communications app, Teams, with Microsoft's platform, in order to keep businesses from trying out Slack and giving more eyeballs instead to Teams by bundling with a platform. So the big point is that a dominant platform, again, is accused for blocking competition and blocking innovative other approaches for solving customers' communication problems. So the Slack versus Microsoft Teams case that many of you know is most relevant for us today because Microsoft, of course, was the defendant in perhaps the biggest antitrust case against the technology company in the last half century, colloquially known the browser wars of the 1990s and 2000s. which is the exact antitrust case in our data today that I'll show you in just a moment. So this new case on the screen is sort of a deja vu, as Slack is saying in their filing. So our project today, looking at whether weakening the power of dominant firms by adding more competition and increases in innovation go actually hand in hand, it's very timely. However, in the light of prior work, we really don't know whether these regulatory interventions that we see today work as promised. And the interesting dilemma is that dominant platforms may block other firms' innovation because they are so very powerful. But they may also bring order to markets and reduce wasteful duplication of similar products and similar firms. So if you open up markets for more competition, kind of let all flowers bloom, does it mean that also some or lots of wasteful duplication will happen? And then as a result, no one profits. And if this is the case, does it lower the incentives for firms to innovate in the first place? So as you can see, the answer is not straightforward. And here's where we come in with the data. So here's the project that we're working on in one slide. So the big question is, do dominant platforms block innovation, as the regulators say? If we reduce the power of dominant platforms, do we indeed get more innovation and more variety? Our setting for the data that I will show you today and what we've been working on is the regulatory shock that aim to add competition to software markets. This is the Microsoft trial in early 2000s. It tried to put a harness on the dominant Microsoft platforms, both on the consumer and on the enterprise side. We focus on one specific complementary market to Microsoft's enterprise server platform, enterprise infrastructure software, and how innovation of firms in this specific market was influenced by antitrust, trying to weaken the platform. So for those who don't know our setting, many of you know, but for those who don't, enterprise infrastructure software is the biggest industry you've never heard of. It is the invisible backbone of enterprise computing. It's used to maintain critical IT assets in a corporation, think cybersecurity, systems management, etc. So what we will do is a focused data deep dive and analysis using this specific segment and show you the results using data of what happened to innovation when Microsoft was regulated. So the spoiler alert here is, what we find is antitrust case drives innovation, drives increases in innovation, but it hurts profits. So regulating Microsoft increased innovation, but hurt profitability in the ecosystem. So point is that these antitrust regulators were effective in a sense that weakening the dominant firm's ability to block competition sparked new opportunities for complementary firms. So think about it, there's a social benefit to antitrust because innovation went up. But at the same time, disrupting the order of an industry also is leading to losses in efficiency because no one profits afterwards. So very quick visual of what we have in the data. Who is the platform? Who is the complementer? Who is trying to innovate here? Reminder, so on the right-hand side of this graph is grayed out the more familiar Microsoft Windows platforms on the user side. So if you're old enough to remember, this is the time when all of us had Microsoft Windows installed on our desktops. So although the browser wars, this case in 2001 is most commonly associated with this user side. That's way too messy for us to analyze. So we are not there today. Instead, our data are from the left-hand side of this graph, which is a significant market. It's enterprise infrastructure. Here, Microsoft's enterprise server platform was dominant, 51% market share, was strategically a very important growth market for Microsoft. And at the time, Microsoft had also entered in a significant way several of the complementary markets to this server platform apps. You could be thinking about them as apps, but was weak in some of the others, which gives us useful variation to analyze the case. So here is a quick visual of what we know, and then I'll show you what we don't know and what we try to bring to you today. So when a dominant platform like Google or Microsoft more strongly also competes in a complementary market, so like the Chrome app or the Teams app, which is indicated with red color in this graph, prior work finds that innovation in that complementary market goes down for everyone, less innovation. What we don't know is what happens when antitrust tries to reduce this bright red color, reduce this competition threat by the platform, and increase competition in complements. For example, by making bundling illegal, as was done in around 2001 for Microsoft. So the big question is, do we get more innovation as the regulators are hoping for? So basically this research question, how is antitrust intervention against a dominant firm related to innovation in the ecosystem? So what did we do? So just like the examples of Google we looked at in the beginning of today, where Google was the dominant mobile platform, also had its own apps like Chrome that it was bundling with platform. Again, the Microsoft case in 2001 prominently refers to dominant platform blocking innovation. Innovation was the central motivator for this case. The point is that this case is especially appropriate setting for us to study competition, regulation, and innovation. So quick visual of the design. Microsoft is the dominant server platform that is being regulated around 2001, also had strongly competitive products in some of the complementary markets, two on the left, and then was not strong in three others. So we use this variation in data and argue that reducing Microsoft's competitive threat through the antitrust case should affect more strongly those complementary markets that are marked in red color, and not so much where it was not much of a player, which are marked in green color. So there are a lot of technical details. We use diff-in-diff analysis, various matching, synthetic controls, technical details. Happy to answer in questions later if you are interested. Our data is a full population of public infrastructure software firms in the US, typical of this sector. Many of the firms are in the Bay Area. We also did interviewing in this sector to ground our analysis, which was a fun part of this project. Now, at this point, you may be wondering, they're interested in innovation. That's the intent. How do you measure? How do you measure innovation? So we use patents. By the time of the case, were standard in software, also alternative measures, and we're also tracking profitability of these firms. So the statistical methods, as I mentioned, are pretty standard. So let's move on to what we found. So what did we find? So we found big headline. When Microsoft was regulated, patenting innovation by complementers in our setting went way up, while Microsoft's own patenting did not experience much change. So competition and antitrust seems to drive increases in innovation. The second result is that when Microsoft was regulated, profits went down, both complementers and Microsoft's own. And few visuals of these results, there are visuals of treated, they are in red, and then actual control firms. So as expected, we are seeing huge increase in innovation of these red treated firms as we had expanded. And then the green firms are the control firms. We are using both synthetic controls. Here are the results on profits. So the results on profits are interesting. So reasoning is repositioning is costly. Even if we get more innovation, there may be wasteful duplication. So it's harder to reap profits. And this indeed seems to be correct. Treated firms in red have slower profit growth after the case, using both actual firms and then our synthetic control firms. So taking all results together, innovation goes way up, profits down. And then we also analyzed Microsoft's case as well. So what did we learn through data that is potentially significant for antitrust decision makers? How do we contribute? For antitrust regulation, our data suggests that intervention against a dominant platform can be effective. It boosts innovation for complementers, apps firms, but profits are reduced, at least in the short term. So overall, our results suggest a potential social benefit to antitrust. Reduced competitive threat from a dominant platform spurs innovation by other firms. But the big question is, it creates this wild west situation where newly constrained dominant firms are less able to impose discipline that would potentially promote efficiency and kill wasteful duplication. So a final closing thought here is that if these ideas that sit in the intersection of innovation, public policy, and responsible and inclusive innovation resonate with you, please do get in touch with us at the Stanford Technology Ventures program, where we have launched a new peak initiative, where we want to make sure that no student whose lives we touch at Stanford leaves Stanford without having thought about questions that relate to social implications of their business decisions and their own ethical principles, whether their future businesses become powerful platforms or smaller, perhaps more innovative complementers. So with that, I'm happy to start answering any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you, Rita. And now it's on to our Q&A, where our attendees have been submitting questions throughout your session. So we have a few minutes for a couple questions. So the first one is, has Zoom become a dominant platform because of the use in school systems that has created a large user base?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh. Has Zoom become a dominant platform because of the use in school systems that has created a large user base?
Oh, has Zoom become? That's a very interesting question. And I wonder if the implication is, should we be then regulating Zoom? And would it bring more innovation? Very interesting question, certainly in the US. So it's interesting, Europe seems to be using more Microsoft Teams. We did not study that directly, but that's a very interesting question. And then in the coming years, are there implications for innovation? Very good question.
The next question is, could the graph on profits be confounded by the recession and dot-com bust that started in 2000 and 2001?
Excellent question. So we looked at this issue. So our reviewers, of course, are wondering about the same issue. And turns out that the results are not affected. So the case is a little bit after, and our results actually should go in exactly the opposite direction that they are doing right now. But that's a really good question. And that's a huge challenge in any kind of design that we're trying to use, because there might be macroeconomic effects that are going on and influences that are going on at the same time. And so we had to carefully separate those effects. Excellent question.
So the next question is, how about the cases where a dominant platform can bundle complementers programs for free, trashes the complementers business by sideswiping?
Absolutely. So much of this antitrust work has been around reduced or increased prices for consumers. And here we have a setting that hasn't been much studied in organizations or strategy, even in the econ field, which really is around innovation. So the question of much of these products are given out for free. And so the questions here are really around, and the antitrust arguments are around innovation, and not so much whether these products might be more or less expensive for consumers. Again, right on target, a very important question to think about.
So I think we have time for one more question. As far as what was the long-term impact on consumers? Did they eventually get better, cheaper products?
Excellent. So we were hoping that the platform ecosystem as a whole would benefit in the long term, and perhaps because we are using smaller windows like 3 years before and after, perhaps we have missed the long-term effects. So we extended the window after the antitrust case 10 years out, and we're still getting the same results. So there isn't much profitability incentive for these firms and the ecosystem, which is a big problem in the long term. So exactly as you were asking, the question still remains, even if we extended the observation window 10 years after the case, the same results remain. We were hoping something that the questioner or the question was asking, that maybe the results would flip, but they don't.
Great, thank you. So unfortunately, that concludes our questions. Thank you, Rita, for answering all those questions.